Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings, and this is my 50 subscriber milestone mark video. Now, this is going to go up weeks after I actually got noted that I had just hit 50, assuming that I still have 50 and someone hasn't unsubscribed, which I suppose is always a possibility, but as of yesterday evening, and no, I'm not going to tell you the date. You can probably find out how many subscribers I have if you really want to bother looking at the number. But as of yesterday, I had 50, so hey, yay, 50 subscribers. That means there are 50 people who think that I occasionally say things that are worth listening to. So as I have the past several times, I'm going to thank my subscribers, my new subscribers since the 25 milestone. And those new subscribers that I have names for are Moonlit Galaxy Gacha, David Blanton, Lance Cavett, Noran Mamdo, James Aaron, James Netwall, Sarah Allegra, Lalbiak Mawai Fanai, I hope I pronounced that right, and Noriko23, and 16 other people who don't want anyone to know who they are, because they probably have more sense than the rest of us. So thanks to all of you. It's very much appreciated that you have all decided to join in with gradually making me almost maybe sort of not really a thing on YouTube. But thanks to everybody. So now that I've done that, someday I may even do a thing for a milestone, assuming people want me to do a thing. So, you know, if you want me to do a thing, now would be the time to start thinking about asking for it for the 100 subscriber milestone, assuming I ever get there. Given that it's taken me 2 years to get to this point, goodness only knows when I might get more subscribers. Anyway, yeah, don't you love my Microsoft Paint skills, my mad Microsoft Paint skills? So we're on Book 4 of the Collegium Chronicles, Redoubt. So this one is kind of, it's in this odd place of, we've been building and building and building up to Mags finding out where he actually came from, because in the first book we knew that he was that his parents were, you know, two people who had something to do with bandits. By the time we get through the second book, it's fairly clear that Mags's parents were being held captive by the bandits. And, you know, as we keep going through these books, we find out more and more hints about these people. We know that they were probably involved with the group of people, in some fashion with the group of people who were trying to cause Valdemar to fall apart, people who were willing to take on a contract with Kars, who are the bad guys. Kars is like, sort of like Russia in the 1950s and 60s in popular culture, only not really. Anyway, I would advise you to look up Mercedes Lackey and what she's written about it if you want to get a better idea of where she's based their cultural mores on. But anyways, so Kars is an ongoing villain throughout basically the bulk of this series. In this book we get, among other things, we finally get something of an answer to where Mags comes from. At the start of this book, everything is just, you know, hunky-dory, fantastic. There's a wedding because the prince is marrying Mags's friend Lydia, who we met in the first book that she was part of a ring of young people who were sort of working as sort of court spies on behalf of the king's own and various other people. Anyway, so there's a wedding, and, you know, there's a lot of grand pageantry and excitement, and Mags is starting to develop his romance with the king's own daughter, whose name is Amelie, spelled with an A at the start. And that romance is starting to pick up speed. We also get a grand denouement of the problems that Bear has been having. Mags's friend Bear, who I really haven't mentioned at all because I've been talking about a lot of things, because there's a lot of stuff in these books. They're not super short books. This one is 394 pages. It's almost 400 pages long. We're not talking 150 pager books where you kind of whip right through it. There's a lot of plot that happens in these. Anyways, Mags has a friend Bear, and Bear is an ungifted healer. That is, he doesn't have magical woo-woo powers that allow him to just touch somebody and make their injuries go away. Bear is instead a proper doctor who has to use proper medications and proper assessment of people rather than letting his magic powers do it for him, and his parents were very, very disappointed, or rather his father was, because he was supposed to be part of the long line of super healers in the family, and instead he was just really, really good at doctoring. One of those things, you're a disappointment because even though you're a tremendous success, you're not successful in the way I expect. We all know that old saw. Anyway, so we get a grand denouement on this where Bear, whose parents were his father, was trying to get him to get married off to some local girl in order to hopefully create more gifted babies, has instead married Bard Lena Marchand, who is Mags's first friend at the Collegium. So Bear's father comes storming up and actually brings a company of mercenary soldiers right to the front door of the Collegium. The problem is that the Collegium is on the palace grounds, the palace being the home of the king. And so basically he decided to march right up to the king's front door with a batch of armed mercenaries, which, of course, had everybody stunned and disbelieving, and some minor hilarity going on in the background as everyone says, "My God, he forgot that the king lives right next door to where the Collegium is." Anyway, so Bear and Lena getting married means that Bear is no longer a dependent of his parents, and so that finally resolves the whole Bear issue, because he can now be his own person and doesn't have to worry about his parents pulling him out of the Collegium or anything else. And Mags is continuing to take his lessons in being a spy and working, eventually at some point, taking over Nicholas's job as the king's ear on the ground and all those kinds of things. Well, the interesting thing here, of course, is that Mags starts feeling like he's being watched, and eventually we find out what that is. Mags gets kidnapped by a couple more people from this foreign land that we know nothing about except that they have assassins there. And they capture him and knock him over the head and drug him and cart him away to Kars. Not that they're going to hand him over to Kars, it's just that Kars is, on the other side of the border, and because they have their contract with Kars, it means they have free passage. So Mags escapes by the skin of his teeth, and we get a whole lot of survival in the woods stuff. So if you're the kind of person who likes watching Bear Grylls or Les What's-His-Name, who you can practically set a watch by when he says, "I haven't eaten for 3 days," you can practically set a watch with that guy. Or, if you like that kind of thing, Mags spends a lot of time figuring out how to survive when all he has is the clothes on his back and a wool blanket. The last, say, third of this book, give or take, is Mags in Kars. And Mags winds up running into one of the demons that the Karsite Blackrobes call, because for some lunatic reason the Karsites decided that instead of And this is explained a little bit. This history, we get an explanation of how Kars turned into the fanatical, obsessive, crazy country just to the south of Valdemar in this book, because Kars was always enemies with is most of the time has been enemies with Valdemar through the bulk of this series, but in this one we get something of a better explanation. There's a hint of an explanation in a book in the Mage Storms trilogy. There is a bit of an explanation, but here we get an explanation from one of the Fire Cats, and Fire Cats are representatives of Vikanda's Sun Lord, who is a god, the god of the Karsites. And Vikandas decided, as this particular cat says, because he had a sense of humor, he chose cats to be his representatives because cats do whatever they want, which makes them particularly frequently unhelpful representatives because they don't actually listen to anybody. At the same time, of course, that makes them helpful because since they don't listen to anybody, except possibly a god, you can be pretty much guaranteed that whatever they're doing is, on behalf of that god. Assuming that god is, of course, getting those cats to listen to him, which is another question entirely, isn't it? Anyways, there's also other stuff like the fact that fire cats are apparently reincarnated sons of the sun, that is the leader of the Vikandas Karsite religion, but anyways, that's neither here nor there. So, there's a whole thing about reincarnation and things. Anyways, there's a lot of reincarnation in these books if you pay attention. So Mags winds up running into, being rescued from one of those Black Robe's pet demons by a young priest, and whose name is France, spelled with an S-E at the end, not a C-E, and the fire cat Realis, or however that's supposed to be pronounced. There are too many vowels in that word. And they basically, when he winds up telling Vikanda's Sun Lord that if you want me to carry a message for you, I'm willing to do it, but you're going to have to make it clear what it is. In the end, it turns out that message is, and it's clearly very, very topical given when these books were written, that if people aren't going to help themselves to an extent, then it doesn't matter how many troops you send in or how much effort you go to save them. If they don't want to save themselves, they're not going to be saved. And that what Valdemar can best do is step back and let Kars work out its own problems. And that sounds like a very, very cold thing to say, but it's very much, I think, connected to concepts of free will, and that a god is willing to do all kinds of miracles on behalf of his followers, but God helps those who help themselves, and if you're not going to bother to help yourself, then, like many other gods, Vikanda's Sun Lord isn't going to bother to help you if you're not going to put in the effort. And so Mags manages, by the skin of his teeth, to get home, and brings France over the border. Now, he's not home, it's just he's over the border in Valdemar, but he and France sort of are going to be friends for life, even if they never see each other again. And France is set up with the ability to cross back and forth in and out of Valdemar so that he can continue to do good works at home. So this is, as I said, as you know, Book 4. So next week we'll be moving on to Book 5, which is the last of the Collegium Chronicles, but will not be the last we hear of Mags. However, I will stop doing Mercedes Lackey for a while and focus on something else. I'll decide what that is when I figure out what that is. And yeah, I haven't spent as much time rambling as I normally would about important things, but I'm out of time, so I'll see you all next week.